Welcome to Explorer Classroom. My name is Vivette Dukes, and I'm so glad you are joining us today. Here in the United States, we are celebrating Women's History Month. It is important to recognize the contributions, genius, and history of women year-round. We especially encourage our viewers to dive into local, state, and national women's history this month. At National Geographic, we use the power of science, exploration, education, and storytelling to illuminate and protect the wonder of our world. Explorer Classroom connects students worldwide with our National Geographic explorers for short lessons and time for your questions. This school year, each month will be organized around a specific theme. This March, Explorer Classroom is exploring the importance of exploration, especially as a tool to help us understand what we can learn from our world and how to better protect our world. Today, our explorer is Justine Ammendolia. Justine is a marine biologist, plastic pollution researcher, and science communicator from Toronto, Canada. This means that she uses what she researches to tell people about the wonderful and sometimes scary things happening in the ocean. You might ask, why is plastic even in the ocean? Well, Justine will share how and why things are going on in the ocean and how joining her as a garbage detective can help our oceans become cleaner and safer for generations to come, mostly by removing the presence of plastic. You'll also learn about how her work can take her to remote Arctic places or even in her own backyard. Well, before we get into today's lesson, I'd like to welcome our registered viewers who join us literally from around the globe. Special shout outs for today go to Howe Manning Elementary School, Midtown Elementary School, Ashton Meadows Public School, Central Middle School, Ellis School, Lyford Clay International School, and all the homeschools out there. Welcome, welcome, welcome. Shout out to you for joining us today. We are thrilled to have all of you here. And with that, let's get this Explorer Classroom started. I cannot wait. It's time to turn it over to you, Justine, to share all about how to be a garbage detective. Woo! Take it away, Justine.
Hey everybody, I am so excited to be here with you all because you know what we're going to be doing today? We're going to be talking all about the stinkiest and grossest things around. Can anyone guess what that is? Shout it out. I'm hearing poop. No, not poop. Garbage. Yes, we're talking all about trash, and that's what I do as a scientist. I basically look at all the different types of garbage in the world and try to understand where it comes from. So we're going to start this presentation. I'm going to share the screen with you all, and we're going to get this started. So yeah, basically, let's just move that here. Cool. So we're going to learn all about how to be a garbage detective like me. Basically, what I do is I look at all the different types of items that we use, like plastic bottles and straws, and I try to figure out where they go once we're done with them. Where do they end up in the environment? But more importantly, how can we keep them out of the environment so that we can keep animals and wildlife safe? My first step into science wasn't actually with garbage and, sorting through all the gross and yucky stuff. My first experience was working with seabirds, these really cute little birds that look like miniature penguins. And, this project that I worked on was with National Geographic, and it totally changed my mind on what kind of problems I wanted to help solve to keep the environment safe. So a bit about myself. Once upon a time ago, I was little, and I grew up in a place called Toronto, Canada. Does anyone know where Toronto is? Does anyone know where Canada is? I'm getting some nods. What's in Canada, folks? Shout it out. I'm hearing Maple Leafs. That's cool. Teachers, you can feel free to write in the chat, eh? Canadians are out in Canada. That's also a good guess. And beavers. Yes, we have lots of beavers up there. But basically, I grew up in a place just north of the US, so we're technically neighbors. And the city I grew up in was really, really big. And we were surrounded by lots of big buildings and big, busy streets. But the moment I went into the ocean for the first time down in Florida, I totally fell in love with it. And my mind was just blown because there were so many animals and the water was always moving. And I was trying to figure out, how could I study this for a living? So when I grew up, I went to go study biology in college. And it was really cool because I took that passion I loved for the ocean, and I ended up finding myself in a helicopter heading to the Arctic at one point, because I met a really, really cool teacher who basically took me under their wing and showed me the ropes on how to become a really cool scientist that does field work in hard to get places. So the story about getting into this helicopter is that when you do work in really far off places, sometimes you can't actually drive to your field site because there are no highways. The place I went to go study these birds was often a place called Greenland. Does anybody know what Greenland is or where Greenland is? I'm getting some confused places. Oh, we got some thumbs up. Yes, we know where Greenland is. That's cool. It's all the way up in the Arctic, and it's the largest island in the world. And what's really amazing about Greenland is the fact that it's called green, but it's mostly covered by ice. So it's quite cold and it can get quite chilly, but it's a really amazing place to go and study wildlife, because up in the Arctic, it's really, really rich for animals to come and eat and fatten up during the summers so that they could survive during the really long winters. So I went to go study these birds called little auks. Again, little miniature penguins, really, really cool birds. This is the field site that I went to go study at. And as you can see, the birds lived all the way up on the top of the cliff. Can anybody imagine waking up at 3 o'clock in the morning, putting on all your winter gear, and then climbing a cliff to go to work or school? It's absolutely mind-blowing because there's no elevators, there's no school buses, you can't get a ride up there. You have to carry everything you need with you to go there. And that's really important because we lived all the way down here. So every day at 3 a.m. when the birds wake up, you have to wake up too and start your morning. The cabin we lived in was really, really cool. It was totally off-grid, meaning no electricity. You couldn't just flick on the lights to turn lights on. You couldn't open the tap and get water. You had to do all this yourself from scratch because there was no connection to a city. I lived with 3 other people during this time, and because we had to bring all our food with us, that meant that we weren't eating fresh apples or pizza or burgers. We were actually eating canned fish for most of it, because when you have to go off grid, canned food really travels well. We were drinking water that we melted from the snow. So big icebergs that would come in, we would take and we would break them up and use that for drinking water. But my favorite part was actually the washroom, because look at this toilet, guys. It's just absolutely crazy. The view was so, so beautiful. And when you're sitting on this toilet, it's funny because when you're in the high Arctic, there's big animals around, like polar bears. So you always have to be alert, even when you're pooping, to make sure that a polar bear doesn't visit you so that you can run really fast. So the birds that I was studying are called little auks, and they're about the size of a thermos. They're, a can of Coke maybe, and they are really, really strong animals. They look like penguins, but they fly super long distances. They can fly up to 100 miles to go to the ocean to get food, but then they have to come back to land because that's where they feed their chicks. And every summer, thousands of these birds get together, and every set of parents will raise a chick so that at the end of the summer, the whole family flies off into the ocean and they go on their merry way. Now, biologists are really, really interested in understanding what birds do when they go off in the ocean. So my project was basically to take these little electronic backpacks. They look like batteries. And once you attach them to the bird, you can basically understand where they're going off in the ocean and get a better understanding of what they're doing, because obviously they can't talk to you, so you have to track them. Now, with my project, everything was going so well because I'm like, all the trackers were on the birds. I thought I would have this amazing data set. But unfortunately, one thing that they don't tell you in school is that your birds can lose their backpacks and they can lose them in the ocean. And I was devastated because I thought, oh no, I don't have a science project anymore. And this was just the worst thing that could have ever happened to a scientist. But one thing that you have to know is that when you're in science, things go wrong all the time, like all the time. And one great part of science is that you have to be creative and you have to think of solutions. So can anyone guess what I did instead of, getting bird backpacks to do my project? It's something stinky, and this is en route to plastics. What I ended up doing was I actually captured the birds one by one, and I collect their bird poop. I collect bird poop for science, basically. Because one thing that you should know is that animal poop has a lot of information in it. It can tell you all about the diet of an animal. It can tell you what it does in terms of like how active it is. It can tell you if it's eating things it's not supposed to. And during this project, we found plastics in the bird poop. And this was mind-blowing because we were all the way up in the high Arctic with nobody around us. And yet we found plastics, from things that we were using down like where I live. So it really made me question, how can plastic from my own backyard end up all the way in the high Arctic? And more importantly, how can I stop this? Because I want to make sure these animals have a healthy home. So I came up with the only solution I could think of. I became a professional garbage detective. I became so fascinated by this idea that I could make a living and I could do a job that basically allows me to ask questions. What kind of plastics are in the ocean? Where do they come from? How long are they there? More importantly, how can we keep them out to make sure that our environment stays nice and clean for the next generation and also wildlife in general? So basically, being part of a garbage detective means you're a treasure hunter. It means that when I go outside my house, I'm always looking down on the ground. Instead of looking up and looking at the scenery, I'm trying to understand what kind of stuff are people throwing out? And again, why is it there? And how can we stop it? So I ended up basically becoming a professional beachcomber where with my job, we would go down to different beaches and we would not only clean up the plastics, but we would track them because we wanted to understand how do plastics change over time in these different environments. And this is really, really important, big pieces of plastic like this from the environment, because we don't want them to break down into really tiny, tiny, tiny pieces of plastic. Does anybody know what tiny pieces of plastics are called? Shout it out if you know. I'm hearing itsy bitsy plastic. Close, but no. What else am I hearing? Someone shout out something. Okay, I'm hearing teeny weeny plastics. Close, but like not really. Actually, you know what? Instead of itsy bitsy plastics, what you actually do, what plastics break down into are something called microplastics. Micro meaning very, very small. And micro is also an illusion, or it also refers to like a microscope, right? You look through the lenses to see really, really tiny things. And microplastics, once they get really small, it's so hard to understand what they were. It's almost like trying to you're basically a detective trying to ask questions. What could these small little pieces of foam be? And, this is actually from takeout containers, from when you go out to a restaurant and you have food that you bring back home. So it takes a lot of creativity and a lot more work to understand where microplastics come from. So it's just better to keep big plastics out of the environment before they get super small. And one way that is a great way of keeping big plastics out of the environment, and teachers, I'm looking at you on this one, is something called citizen science. Now, citizen science means anybody can be a scientist. You don't need me in the picture. Basically, if you folks ask questions and you're curious and you go outside and you wonder why things the way they are, that's basically being a scientist. So citizen science is a way where, you could pick up your cell phone and basically track all the different types of plastics that you see out in the world. Now, when I go and clean beaches and I work with communities, I always engage with people and I get them to record what they're seeing on an app called Marine Debris Tracker. And this app is absolutely fantastic because it's almost like your little garbage bin. If you see a plastic bag, you click the plastic bag and it goes into your garbage bin. And everybody around the world can see this information, including scientists who are trying to find the answers on how to keep plastics out of the environment. So anybody can do citizen science. You can do a cleanup and a tracking session in your schoolyard. You can do it with your family when you go out for a walk. You can do it with your friends. It's just a really, really cool tool to become a garbage detective yourself. Now you're probably thinking, cool, you're a garbage detective, you like stinky things, you like gross things, but you want to keep the environment clean. What does it take to be a garbage detective? And there's 3 things that you need to do this yourself. You need to be able to look for clues. Who in the room likes, in your classrooms, who likes solving puzzles? Who likes seeing a really hard problem and you're like, I'm going to solve you. I'm going to get down to the root. Okay, see, good, hands. You're basically garbage detectives. If you look at something and you're like, why are you the way you are? That's basically what you have to ask plastics. Because, plastics can't tell you their story. You have to ask them and you have to have a conversation and you have to figure out, how did this end up here? You also have to use your imagination. I can already tell that you, just from your classrooms, they're so brightly colored that you folks have a really, really big imagination. And that's where you have to think of a story. How did this Kit Kat wrapper that I ate for lunch end up on the side of the street? Did it maybe blow out of the garbage can when I used it, or when I threw it out and it flew away and it did a dance and now it's on the sewer? Great. That's the kind of story that you have to come up with. You also have to look around you. And it's so important that you look at the environment. If you're in a big city, why are the plastics different in the big city than in a small community in the suburbs? Asking questions that relate to your environment and geography are really, really important. So I think I've bored you enough between bird poo and stinky garbage. So we're going to play a game, and teachers, you can write the answers in the chat. And I can also listen to you all share your responses. But basically, we're going to play the game, Guess the Plastics. So I'm going to show you some of the cool plastics that I found on my journey, and you're going to shout out answers on what they are. So this one, does anybody know what this plastic is? Take a good look. And teachers, you can write your messages in the chat. A balloon string, yes. Good job. Who is that? Oh, the Muskies. Congratulations. A string from a balloon. Actually, this is the trick question. It's also the balloon on there. So that little nub where you tie off the balloon, you can see it's still attached here, and there's multiple strings on it, which mean, this was a much bigger piece of plastic. But this is a really, really important lesson, folks. If you have balloons at your birthday party or at a family party, it's not a good idea ever, 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 ever to let them out into the environment, because they just end up in the ocean and they just end up hurting animals. So this is a really, really important plastic to look out for, because it's something that's really easy to keep out of our environment. This one, does anybody know what this is? And no, it's not the magic school bus. So give me your answers. A toy car, right on. Oh, Miss Kipwell, good job. And yeah, and one thing to notice with these trucks, right? This toy car, everyone, you're brilliant. You're going to take my job. But one thing to notice with these toy cars is one thing here. There's a missing tire. So that means when I find a miniature tire, maybe 100 meters down the beach, I know that piece of plastic broke off from this one. So it's really, really important to look for clues and try to figure out, where do plastics come from, so that you can classify them the right way. This is a really tricky one. I would be super impressed if anybody knows what this is. Go for it. A glove? Nope. I'm wearing a glove to keep my hands clean because this beach was really gross. An old plastic tank? No. Anybody? Maybe the teachers might get it past their swim shoes. No, 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 no. This is a very interesting Gatorade bottle. Close, but not really. A backpack. A backpack. Wow, that's a good one. I haven't had that one before. Okay. Any other guesses? I'll take a water bottle. Okay. Laundry bottle. Yes, 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 yes. But you know what's really, really funky about this water bottle? You can tell, I know, like for the middles in the audience, you don't do your own laundry. I'm sure your caretakers do it for you. But when you go into your laundry room or you're at the dryer, you see those big chunky plastic bottles. This one's all squished up and gross. And this happens when plastic gets burnt. So you can see this guy here. This is also another example of a burnt plastic. You can see that this used to be fishing rope and fishing nets, but when it gets in the fire, it doesn't melt away like wood does and, create heat, but rather all the chemicals squish together and the plastic becomes totally deformed. So that's one thing to watch out for when you're looking for plastics, is that sometimes they don't look the same from when you threw them out. So yeah, burnt, a Tide bottle actually. So you can tell the labels there and the little cap up there. Does anyone know what this one is? I think we should all be familiar at this point. And masks, yes, lots of masks. And this is one interesting thing is that, when you find face masks in a big city, you're going to find a lot of them because there's a lot of people there. So understanding how many masks is another really cool question you can ask in being a garbage detective. These ones here, this is the true or false. Are these real plants? False, fake plants. Yes, fake plants all around. And these ones were super tricky because when you're on the beach and you're just seeing plastics like this all day and you're like, oh, this has to be a plastic. It's bigger than my head. But then you see a tiny little plant this big growing out of rocks and you're like, oh my gosh, this is such a cool plant. They're actually fake flowers from decoration from people's houses. So it's never a good idea to buy fake plants and, put them outside because they just make microplastics after. And this is the last one. If anyone can guess this one, I would be so impressed. And this is a very typical, I'll give you a clue. Dental floss string, close. Not dental floss. We don't have that many dentists on beaches. This also came fishing line, close. Confetti, Easter basket string. Ooh, that's a creative one. No, actually, so this is, I'll show you a live example for a second. Okay, so back to the burnt plastic. This is fishing rope, right? You can see right here, it's starting to fray. You think rope is really strong and it never breaks up, but it's actually pretty wild because it does. So you can see over here that if you leave plastics outside in the sun for a really long time, they kind of get a little cranky. They puff up and then they poof and they explode. So especially with fishing rope, because people use it so much when they're fishing, and then, it gets lost, for example, in the ocean, and then it gets battered against the rocks and the sun's beating down on it, it can break up into super tiny pieces like this, where, you might think it's dental floss, but it's actually part of a massive piece of rope. And that's why it's really important to keep big plastics out of our environment so that we don't have to problem solve our way into microplastics. But anyways, folks, that's the end of the presentation. I'm so excited to talk trash with you all. So give me your dirtiest questions you have, and yeah, let's nerd out about it.
We have so many more questions. We would be here for the rest of the day, but unfortunately our time is just about up. So thank you again, Justine, and all the students and teachers watching. We hope you join many more of our events. Our next event for ages 9 to 14 will be on Thursday, March 9th, with explorer Ricardo Rocha, who will share the various tools he uses to research bats in Madagascar to uncover their role in the ecosystem. So go ahead and register for that event and more at natgeoed.org/Explorer Classroom. You can request a chance to be featured on screen. And fellow teachers, we've also created a new interactive guide for you to share with your students to take them on a learning journey with each of our special guests. You can find the Explorer Mindset in Action Guide and Teacher Edition linked on each event registration page. Have a great day, everyone. And remember, stay curious and keep exploring. Bye.
Bye, everyone.
Bye-bye.